Hello and welcome to the Sci-Fi and Fantasy edition of the incoming video podcast. This is the show that looks back at my favourite sci-fi and fantasy miniature releases of the last week. This is episode 24. This show looks back at the releases for week ending the 19th of March 2010, and I'm Neil Shook. Well, definitely some interesting stuff around this week, so I hope you'll find something interesting in the selection of miniatures I've got for you this week. Kicking off at number 10, and we have a new release from Mantic. Now, Mantic have been producing two armies over recent months. We've got the Elves and more recently the Undead. This is their next expansion for their Elven range, and these are their Palace Guard. It's a quite unusual sort of sculpt. It almost doesn't look elvish, if you know what I mean. Yes, the anatomy continues to be very spindly, which I quite like with Mantic's Elves. I think it makes them look more, for want of a better phrase, alien, you know? Yeah, elves are meant to be lighter built than humans, and so I quite like the anatomy differences that Mantic have brought into the elven race. This, however, it almost looks more like a Chaos Warrior, doesn't it? And the fin on the helmet, I know this is fantasy, but if that was on a real helmet, the guy wouldn't be able to hold his head up. So it's possibly a little bit overkill. More than anything, I think detail-wise, it just needs to be showed down a bit. I mean, I know a couple of people have commented that, and I do agree with them. The detail on that particular bit is a bit heavy. On the whole, not a bad figure, though. Number 9, and first of a couple of new releases this week from Reaper. Reaper have just posted a whole load of new previews. These are one of my favourites, and these are the Mouseling heroes and characters, sculpted by Gene Van Horn and Bobby Jackson. Why these? Well, other than the fact that I think they look rather cute, they appealed. And I suppose, especially the last guy that you'll see in a second, is very reminiscent of a certain character out of the Prince Caspian film. Something different, a little bit out of the ordinary, and they just appealed. Number 8, and we have a new release from GZG, and rather unusually, it's a non-human race. These are the Malts, which are actually an alien race from the Hammer Slammers universe. Again, very unusual to come across aliens in Hammer Slammers. Yeah, it's a very hard sci-fi universe, so you don't tend to get an awful lot of aliens around. An interesting take on a lizard-like race. Decent enough sculpts, I think, and rather unusually for GZG. These are in 28mm, as opposed to their more normal 15mm. Interesting stuff from GZG. Next up, we have a release from AEG, which a lot of people don't normally see featured here. And with them being a board game company, not the sort of thing you'd normally expect to see them featured in miniatures very often. However, if you've been keeping on the forums, you'll know that there is a new miniatures game coming out called Dust Tactics. These are the infantry, and I wanted to look at these because a lot of people were wondering, well, you know, just how good are these? I believe these are all, well, I'm not quite sure if they're fully pre-painted. They're at least coloured so you can paint them, but I'm actually quite impressed with these. Now, Dust is an alternative World War II, so this is based, again, it's, you know, the sort of World War II, late 40s, early 50s World War II combat, and these are the German troops. They're recon grenadiers, and as I say, I think they've actually done a pretty good job on these. I like the anatomy, I like the sculpts. I'm quite looking forward to seeing where they go. I think this is actually could be a decent game. I think this is worth keeping an eye on. I really do. Alternative World War II is a big area of interest for me, so I'm definitely interested in seeing what happens with these particular miniatures. Number 6, and we have a new release from Zenit Miniatures. Quite an unusual looking figure. This is another one of their dragonflies. Really don't know in what context you would use this figure at all, but I think it's a really well sculpted mini. Obviously here you've got, it's actually an artificial dragonfly, so you've got somebody effectively flying a contraption of some sort. Very original subject, original sculpt, very well done, really impressive. Good stuff from Zenit. Number 5, and a couple of new releases this week from Impact Miniatures. Now, Impact specialise in fantasy football figures. First off, we see a couple of the new Timberline Hunters. These are for their Elven range. I do like the look of these. I mean, they're almost native Indian, aren't they? If you're playing, I don't know, something like Wood Owls, for example, these would be an ideal replacement for your War Dancers, I think. And then we have a limited edition figure called Aquila. This is something they're producing for this year, who is basically, I suppose, an Eagle Star player. Something very unusual. I like the way they've done the stylised wings into the armour, and I think that's just a really nice sculpt. So, all you fantasy footballers out there, got some interesting stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing more of their elves. Number 4, we have a new release from Grindhouse Games for their Incursion range. Now, Incursion is a board game that came out January time and has been causing some stir. Obviously, before that, they released a set of miniatures that supported that. Now they're looking at the second wave of releases. Part of that is bringing out new figures for the game, and these are from the British MI13 range. Here you see we have a Grenadier, a Commando, an Assault Commando, and a character, a guy called Paddy Main. On the whole, not a bad set of sculpts. The Grenadier looks quite strange. I mean, I suppose he's armed with a primitive version of a rocket-propelled grenade. As several people have mentioned, it looks more like a harpoon gun. More promising sculpts from Grindhouse. Looking forward to seeing what they do with these, what the stats are for the game, etc. But I'm looking forward to seeing what else Grindhouse are doing to support the game. Looking good. Number 3, next up a new release from Reaper, another one of their releases for this week. This is a more sci-fi figure. This is somebody called Andre Durand Time Chaser. As you can see, a figure that is, well, I suppose quite pulp sci-fi in a lot of ways. A cross between high-tech and very 18th century. Especially looking at a couple of weapons he's holding and just basically the way he's dressed. A very well sculpted miniature of this. I was just really impressed. It's a nice character figure. You know, it's almost like a sort of Captain Jack Harkness ilk of figure, if you like. You know, I think it's following that sort of genre. I really like it. Nice character figure. Number 2, a new release this week from Dark Sword. Dark Sword have released several new figures, most of which you've already seen. This is a new one. This is a limited edition female barbarian, sculpted by Jeff Grace. And I think you'll agree, this is simply a beautiful figure. Very archetypal, but I mean, then again, you know, this is Dark Sword, and they're sculpting based on fantasy art. So from that side of things, it's going to be a fairly stereotyped figure. But all that said, I think it's a really nice looking figure. I do like the way little details, for example, that you've got a covered shield which has a wooden backing. You can just about see that down there. I think this continues with Dark Sword's generally high standards of sculpting. Yeah, it's a fantasy female, and therefore it has some anatomical quirks, shall we say. But for all that, I think this is beautifully sculpted, and not over the top. Nicely detailed, you know, really without being, you know, OTT on everything and having lots of detail all over the place. So I think it gives a good opportunity just to give a really nice flowing paint job. Excellent figure. But my number one this week is reserved for a new release from Dwarf Tales. Now, we've seen a couple of these over recent weeks. You may remember the foot-winged hussars that you saw a few weeks ago. Oh, this is a new one. This is a Krakow Squire, sculpted by a guy called Kul Asirik, and I think you'll agree, this is an excellent miniature. Here we see two versions. We see a kind of cut down version of the figure, and then we see a completely tooled up version, so it looks like the figure's got a backpack that can be attached, which contains the spear and the shield, well, buckler, which contains the shield, the buckler, the bow. And what you end up with is a seriously tooled up miniature. And what impresses me is just the level of sculpting detail. Fantastic sculpting in the face, great kit, lots of detail to pick out for all you painters out there. Just the overall impression of the figure, I think it looks awesome. Really impressed with this. And that's all we have time for. Well, I hope you've seen something you like this week. It's been a bit of a mixed week, I think. And I don't think there's been a fantastic amount of figures that have really leapt out at you and said, yeah, these are absolutely awesome. But some very decent releases amongst this week's selection. Before I go, I just want to say thank you to Bill at the Miniatures page, Zach at Tabletop Gaming News. Without these guys' hard work on their sites, this podcast simply wouldn't be possible. So until next week, take care of yourselves, happy gaming, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye.